Welcome, a new episode, Shakers and Movers in Europe. Europe back to the streets, but how are we going to do that? And we are going to do that through dialogues about shakers and movers that have very interesting examples, very interesting tools, instruments themselves to bring Europe back to the streets. And today I have a special guest, a very special guest. He's from Bonaire, and I think the first thing you might ask yourself is, but Bonaire, that's outside the European Union, right? Well, Bonaire is a so-called overseas country and territory, and they are part of the European family. They vote for the European elections, they're part of Europe, and they are part of the Netherlands Kingdom. So we have here today in my office, Clark Abraham, and he's a commissioner for Bonaire. Clark, welcome.
Thank you, Samira. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. And it's actually very funny how you say it also. Indeed, in Bonaire, we can vote for European Union. And actually, you were the first candidate to run an active campaign in the overseas countries and territories of the Dutch state. And it was actually very honorable because that makes also the islands more connected to Europe. And we applaud you for that.
Thank you for that. And I remembered it indeed very well. We met in 2019, and that was because of the elections. And I remembered our very first conversation about it. What I noticed is that you had a very strong interest for Europe, for the relationship between Bonaire and the EU, and you know a lot about it. Why do you find it so important to work on the relationship with the overseas countries and territories?
Well, actually, it's very funny because I walk around to come inside the building with a passport.
We have the same.
We have the same passport, but the passport says on top, European Union first, then Kingdom of the Netherlands. So being a Bonairean, I was born a subject of the European Union.
Yes.
I am a citizen of the European Union. And that's a fact, that's a given. Our roots, Bonaire is a small island in the Caribbean. We have 25,000 inhabitants now, but everybody in Bonaire is a migrant. They came from somewhere and they established themselves in Bonaire. But for 400 some years, almost 500 years, we are connected to the European Union, not yet, but the European continent. We are Europeans. We speak a European language. We speak Dutch, we speak Spanish, we speak English, and we speak Papiamento. And Papiamento is a mix of Portuguese, of Spanish, of African. So, yeah, we are proud Europeans. And actually, it's very funny because a lot of times we feel ourselves more European in a certain sense that we have the heritage, the background, train of thought. Don't forget, we are in the Caribbean. We are in front of the coast of South America, but our customs are not completely as from the region. So we are literally with a foot on both continents. We are a foot on the South American continent, and we're one foot in the European continent. And we should be proud of what we are and who we are in our heritage, with all facets of it, the good and the bad, because it created what we are.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, I visited Bonaire now a couple of times. I love to visit Bonaire. There's a special energy I cannot really describe. And indeed, what you say, it's a smaller community in the kingdom, but a very diverse community. And I think that is very special. And if you look nowadays at the challenges that we're facing in the world, take, for example, climate change, then so many interesting things happen in Bonaire. At the same time, very vulnerable to the climate change, but I also learned about best practices that at the moment are being developed with, for example, universities at Bonaire. So that's only one example of what Bonaire has to offer. This episode is about shakers and movers. One thing I know about you is that, I mean, you know how to shake things up as a politician in a good way. You know how to move things for change in politics and society. And this is also about how to bring Europe and European politics to the streets. And one thing I know from you and one thing I learned from you is how to do that on a grassroots level. So Can you also talk us through a little bit? What is your way of doing politics? And you're now a commissioner.
Yes.
That's a
Yes.
different role. But what have you learned about grassroots politics, and why is it so important to do local politics?
Yeah, well, all politics are local, and that's basically the first given. Politics is human relation. Politics is emotion. Politics is what people feel, what happens in their daily life, and what happens. You notice that when politics gets disconnected with the people is when people don't feel that they are recognized, or their emotions are recognized, or what they struggle with daily is recognized anymore. Well, it's funny, we say the shakers and movers. Why would you get into politics if you wanted to keep the things the same? Then
The status quo.
yeah, nobody. I don't believe that anybody gets into politics to say, well, I'm gonna put myself electable to keep things as they are. That would be strange, in my opinion. You always strive for progress. The difficult thing is not all development is necessarily progress, because you can also develop in a negative direction. What, in my opinion, misses a lot in politics, that politicians lose or get disconnected with the basic stuff, with what moves people, what inspires people. And in your own campaign, for example, it's already 5 years ago. The fact that you took time, came down to the islands, the first time a candidate for a member of the European Parliament chooses to come down to a small island of 25,000 people. At that time, not even 25, was 20,000 people. The people felt heard. The people feel like, hey, wait a minute, I matter. What we experience on this small island, there's this big entity called Europe that might have my back. They might also come out for my interests. And to have a voice in such a huge entity, being it the European Union itself, with all the countries and all the member states, with all the factions and the delegations and all these opinions, to have a voice also for this maybe forgotten community, maybe a neglected community. It says a lot. And in politics, that's what people want. People want to be heard. People want it might be in the bigger scheme of things, a very minute issue. But for that group of people, it's a very big issue. And you just mentioned climate change, for example. Bonaire doesn't have any factories. We don't have almost negligible carbon output. But if climate change, if all the projections would be half true, Bonaire would have a disproportionate negative effect, because Bonaire on the north side has some hills, but on the south side we are completely sea level.
Yes.
So we would lose maybe 50 to 40% of land territory. So we are dependent on bigger states. We are dependent on the European Union to make sure that we can mitigate the effects that would cause climate change. But on the other hand, also we will need support to, in case of, again, if the projections seem to be half true, to have the support to make the adaptations needed to not be affected as big as projected at this time. So the beautiful thing of the European Union is we are much bigger than the European continent.
Absolutely.
We stretch out until the Caribbean, in the Pacific Ocean, and sometimes people forget this.
Yes.
Here in Brussels, people forget that, wait a minute, it's not only the member states who form this big family.
But
these
together with the overseas countries and territories.
Yes. So for you to imagine, right, if a citizen of Bonaire right now, we're in a very peculiar situation. A citizen likes a sport, any sport, football, or they want to play basketball. We are on the Latin American continent, but we are a European entity. Where do we participate? What competition? Do we compete in the Latin American competition, in the Caribbean competition, in the So European Union stretches more than one continent. You stretch over other continents, and it would be good to have that attention also for the frontiers, for the countries and the territories in the frontiers,
Yes.
who make Europe actually the special that they are. And if we walk around in Brussels, if I walk around in Amsterdam, walk around in Paris, walk around in any major city, Stockholm, you see also the riches accumulated over the centuries, not by only looking inward into Europe, but going outward. So we are part of this family, and we would like a very strong bond in cooperation with the European
Yes.
Union to better our people, because we are European subjects.
And I think also for the European Union to learn more from you in so many areas. So these days you're here in Brussels. Tell me, what's your first impression here in the European Parliament, and what is your schedule looking like? So you have spoken to different people.
Yes.
So how was that all going?
Well, normally we don't come to the parliament. Normally, if we come here in official business, we go mostly to the commissions as OCTs.
Yes.
This is actually my first formal visit at the parliament. Actually, I came to visit you specifically because you created an entrance for us here at the European Parliament, and we really appreciate that. Walking around and talking, first of all, of course, it's huge.
Yeah.
It's big. You see, of course, many interests and many moving and bustle and trying to get agendas aligned. And we spoke with several other members, MPs, but we're in a special period right now also, of course, with just the elections just coming by.
And the transition of old versus new
exactly.
parliament.
Exactly. But what we notice mostly, and not only here in the European Union, in the parliament, but lack of knowledge even of the OCTs, of not enough knowledge about the OCTs and what specifically goes on there. And you see it in policy, you see it in execution. For example, one of the biggest and beautiful project, we really applaud that project, is of the global gateway that European Union is trying to pursue.
Yes.
And one part of that is a submarine fiber cable from Brazil to Colombia. It passes right in front of the coast of the three islands. Nobody really thought of it in the European Union. Hey, maybe should we connect these OCTs that are part of Europe? And it's for us sometimes baffling. Why? Because we have right now, there's being developed in Bonaire a project of a substation for the Galileo project, for the satellite project. And all this data that's going to be gathered on that substation or transferred is going to go through other countries because we are not connected directly to the European Union. So my impression walking around here is, how can we get these common goals? How can we get these common efforts on the agenda? And get them aligned.
And actually simple blind spots in the examples that you mentioned, like these simple blind spots that if you would even talk about it with the right persons here, then that can be fixed.
Exactly. And actually that's mostly the reaction, right? Oh, really?
Yeah.
We didn't think of it.
Well, when you told me, I mean, even when you told me, I was like, what? So
because it's understandable, right? You have 700 plus MEPs here. It's understandable that they don't know every project and every dossier that's going on.
We can't. No,
it's impossible. It's humanly impossible. You have so many directories also. So maybe a complete different directory is busy with this project, while they don't even have on the agenda the OCTs. So how do we transfer these barriers? And a simple podcast that you're holding, bringing Europe back to the streets, but also actually bringing the streets to Europe, because this messaging goes both ways. It's trying to explain what you're doing in Europe for the people, but it's also trying to bring what's happening with the people into Europe.
Yes.
And that disconnect of what's really happening in the communities, and that should be a bigger part of the political discourse in such a huge platform as European Union. That's essential.
Absolutely.
And I really applaud you for doing this initiative, because we should have more of this. Imagine if all MEPs did this. That would be great, because then the messaging comes where it needs to be.
Absolutely. And what we're definitely trying at the moment to get more ambassadors also for the Europe to the Street initiative, and then also specifically for adopting the OCT strategy under that umbrella. So luckily, some Dutch MEPs already said that they really want to adopt the OCT strategy. So we're definitely gonna ask them to do that, to keep doing that. But there's also one thing, I think, a very significant cause of all this, the lack of representation.
True.
Right?
True.
I mean,
True.
in 2019, I was the first Dutch elected with Afro-Caribbean roots.
Yes.
Only in
Preferential
2019,
votes.
preferential votes. Yes, and I got a lot of votes from Bonaire.
Yes.
And then this election, we only had Kenville Kleinmoeder.
Yeah.
But nobody is elected now at the moment with from the Caribbean
With
part
roots,
of the kingdom.
Yeah. With OCT roots in that sense.
So there is also this institutional, more structural problem here. I'd say. How do you see that?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that because actually it's sad, right? It's sad even that we should look at to somebody's roots for your cause to be addressed.
True.
Because if you are a representative, you will representative all interest of those you represent.
Yeah.
The fact is that a lot of times, if it's not somebody with the roots, the issues would not get there. Simply because somebody with the roots, for you, it's natural.
Yeah.
Because you know that the plight of your people also matter. So you actively went to visit and try to incorporate what's happening there into what's happening here. But it's human nature. It's human nature that if you are not part of something, or if you're not influenced by something, if you didn't experience something yourself, it's very hard for somebody to fathom and even worse, even more intensely, vocalize what's happening to somebody else. So, and in our case, it's not only with the European Union. The islands, part of the Dutch kingdom, have the same issue in the Dutch parliament. That what's happening on the islands, it's not really known in Dutch politics.
Yeah.
And you mentioned it in the beginning because all politics are local. To give you an example, in Holland, there was in the last campaign, a couple of things were the three main topics. One of them was migration, climate change, etc. We have the same issues.
Well, speaking about migration and Bonaire and all the other countries and islands, yes.
We have a huge problem. We were 9,000 inhabitants in 99. We were 16,000 inhabitants in 2016, and now we're 25. So we almost triplified in population in 2 decades.
Yeah, but also the pressure of the crisis and the situation in Venezuela, for example.
Venezuela, in the region. But now, actually, we're having a lot of migration coming from mainland Holland to the island with an economic power, purchasing power much greater than the local population. So they're being kind of pushed out of the economic market. What happens is when you have elections then in Holland, they talk about migration. We have the same issue, but they're talking about it from a different perspective than we talk about it. So again, it's not ununderstandable that it's not on their agenda, but it's still not good, because if you are representing people, you should represent the causes of all people. And if we come to the situation where we have to deem that our causes are not represented, then of course we're going to look like, wait a minute, who understands us? Who can bring that to the table? And then you come down to, okay, wait a minute, what's somebody's heritage? Because again, you actively went to campaign to say, listen, these issues are not enough on the agenda. I want to bring them on the agenda. And now Kenville also did that. But if you look also the difference where Kenville was placed on the list compared to where you were. So it wasn't really that there was a chance that he would be elected if it wasn't for preferential votes. It should not depend on a specific candidate. It should be part of the policy of every party within the liberals, the Christian Democrats.
I totally agree. It should be mainstream, right? It should be normalized.
Not a niche.
No. And it's a niche, to be honest. And that's also what I've noticed throughout these years. I mean, we have spoken about it a lot. Speaking about representation, so you have a lot of experience as a politician, but now you changed roles. Now you're the commissioner for Bonaire. That's another role. It's a very important one. It's a very influential one. And I know that you find it very important that the international relations with Bonaire but also with other islands, with the region, needs to be strengthened.
Yes.
Because again, I think my opinion is that the Caribbean part of the Dutch kingdom has so much to offer.
Yes.
Also in terms of economics, also in terms of trade. I mean, it's not only climate related or socially related. So I am curious about the transformation that you make as a politician, so as a councillor, and then now the commissioner. That must be a change.
It is a change. It is a change.
How?
Well, as a representative, look, I'm very strong in my political discourse. If I have an opinion and I believe that it serves the people, then you go all in. Why? Because that's your role as representative also to stand for all that you believe the people need. As a commissioner, it's not much different. The only thing is, as a commissioner, you are the commissioner of all. And you have to balance things. And also what's very important, you mentioned just now about management of expectations also. In policy making and in governance, actually what you're doing is you're managing scarcity. There's never enough funds to do all that needs to be done at the same time. So you have to make choices. Governing means making very difficult choices because it means sometimes in 3 priorities, making the choice that you can only execute 2 of them. Or
not
maybe
everyone
even 1.
will be happy.
Not everyone will be happy. But that's why you need people to govern, because you have to make those choices. Doing 3 things half is actually worse than maybe choosing 1 or 2 and doing them good. And that's a little bit difficult because the change of government was pretty recently in October. So sometimes, and also that's a difficult thing, right? As a politician, you try to create also hope with people, telling them, listen, we're gonna change it. But sometimes people expect that the change will happen tomorrow. And not even soup is created in an instant. You have to heat the water first, and hopefully,
and especially not Caribbean soup.
Exactly, it takes time. It takes time. It has to be good, right? So, but when it takes its time, then the soup will be great. So it's the management of expectation, and still achieving your goals is complex. Saying no and telling people, yes, this is very important, but right now in all the priorities that we have, we cannot sadly execute it right now, but this is in our second phase that we will execute it. But honestly, let me put it this way. I did not enter into politics to stand on the sideline and complain. So I entered into politics knowing this. I entered into politics to bring about change. Mind you, change never happens without friction. So it's part of it. It's part of having difficult conversations. It's part of having people not happy. It's part of, so when you have a wound also, before it starts healing, first you're going to feel some pain. In Dutch they even have a saying, zachte heelmeesters maken stinkende wonden. So if you don't address the wound correctly, you will not get the end result that you want. So it's part of it, Samira. And it is what it is. And I always tell them also in Bonaire, give us the time. Let us do what we need to do. And I use this analogy all the time. I said, listen, we promised to build a house. But you arrive at the building site right now and you see a big hole in the ground because we're trying to put the foundation down. And you get scared. Yes, but if I don't make a good foundation, we'll get the roof will topple on us.
Yeah.
So allow us time to make a sound foundation.
Yes.
And building great buildings, making great works takes time.
Yes.
And you cannot do it overnight.
Absolutely. And I think your asset is that, I mean, you really know how to bring politics, like literally to the street, to the people, and you're bringing that now in your role as commissioner. I mean, you've been commissioner years ago before, shortly, and now you have a new mandate. And in the meantime, you were a politician. And I think that's very, very valuable that you bring that as a commissioner. So going back to the topic of bringing politics to the street, bringing Europe to the streets, bringing the overseas counties and territories to the streets. What would be your last advice for everyone listening and watching, especially the younger generation, also from the Caribbean part of the kingdom, who might be interested in politics, in the same roles you had, or maybe the same role I had? Like, what is your advice?
Change will not happen by itself. We need shakers and movers. If you believe it could go better, and you might even disagree with me, and I applaud that, don't sit around and complain. Act, stand up, go for what you believe in. Don't give up. Times will be harder before they get better. Politics is can be very dirty, but it's sometimes the price you have to pay if you want to achieve what you believe is right. So go for it.
Thank you very much. Clark Abraham, Commissioner for Bonaire. He's here now in Brussels. It was an honor to have you here. Thank you so much for making that time. And this was a new episode, Shakers and Movers. I hope that you enjoyed watching and listening. Thank you.